Ghost Deck, The Nightmare Voyage, Part 3, The Spiral Trials. The rules have changed. What started as a haunted cruise has become something far deeper, a spiritual war set adrift in time, memory, and blood. 3 ghosts are freed, 7 remain cursed. But now, the living know the truth. The Mazi is not just a ship, it's a prison, a puzzle, a stage for the final ritual. As Deck Zero reveals its secrets and the crew faces echoes of their own sins, they'll need more than courage to survive. They'll need each other, and even that might not be enough. Chapter 35, The Door of Names. The door waited, steel-bound, pulsing, carved with the names of the lost. Dead crew members, forgotten guests, people no one on the Mazi even remembered boarding. And now, their names glowed red. K-Rob stared at it. That's every soul trapped in this ship. Keezy moved beside him, her glow dim but steady. They're not just names, they're voices, screaming to be remembered. Frankie stepped forward, the star mark on his wrist still faintly burning. This ain't just a door, it's a grave. The group stood silent, K-Rob, Keezy, Frankie, Mulan, Icy, and Melissa. Behind them, the ghosts of Nick, DeWinna, Santana, Link Jr., and Melissa's cousin lingered just beyond the veil. Not fully back, but not gone either. We go through, K-Rob said. We face what's next. We own what this ship really is. Keezy nodded. She reached for the handle. The door creaked open with a hiss, and what they saw on the other side shouldn't have been possible. It was a ballroom. Massive, luxurious, perfect, not rotted, not haunted, not yet. Dozens of people danced in silence. Black tie elegance, masked faces. A string quartet played music no one could hear. What the hell is this? Icy whispered. Frankie's voice cracked. It's a memory, but not ours. A woman stood alone at the edge of the room, African American, wearing a red dress, face pale, eyes lost. Keezy gasped, "That's me." But her body was standing right there beside them. Frankie looked at the ballroom again. This ain't a haunting. This is a loop. Suddenly, the music stopped. The dancers froze. All at once, they turned toward the crew faces, melting into something else. White eyes, black mouths, and open arms. "Welcome back," they all whispered. The ballroom fell into shadow, and the only thing left glowing was the name at the center of the door. Keezy. Chapter 36, The Loop That Wears Her Face. In Link. The ballroom twisted as if it had breath, floor bending, chandeliers swaying like they were underwater. Keezy stepped forward slowly, eyes locked on the woman in the red dress. Same face, same skin, same scar above the eyebrow. But the smile, wrong, too still, too soft, too much like someone wearing her. In Link. The music restarted, but it was backward now, a violin bleeding its own strings, a piano coughing out broken chords. The dancers circled in slow motion, pulling back into their ritual. Keezy's double raised her glass, voice silk smooth and venom-laced. "You left me here." In Link. K-Rob tried to follow but slammed into an invisible barrier, glass-like, humming with energy. "She has to face this one alone," Frankie muttered. "The ghost took her image, not just her name. It wants her to forget who she is." In Link. Inside the ballroom, Keezy's steps echoed. She stood face to face with the mirror version. "You're not me." The double smirked. "Aren't I? I remember the truth you buried." The room darkened. A mirror appeared behind them, and in it, a scene began to play. In Link. Keezy. Years ago, back in Philly, a stormy night, a street corner, her mother, screaming from the sidewalk as Keezy ran, not to save someone, but to leave someone. She watched herself disappear into the rain. In Link. "You never forgave yourself," the ghost whispered. "So I stayed behind. I lived in the part of you that lies to survive." Keezy's fist clenched. "I did what I had to do." "Number you did what hurt less," the ghost hissed. "You left family behind so you wouldn't be broken." In Link. The music stopped again. The mirror cracked, and the double lunged. In Link. But Keezy didn't run. She reached forward and hugged her. Hard. Real. "I am broken," she said, "but I'm still whole." The double gasped, glitched, flickered, then smiled. In Link. The ballroom exploded into light. The dancers vanished. The walls folded in like paper. Kizzy stumbled back into her own body. K-Rob caught her. "You good?" She nodded, breath shaking. I remembered who I was. Frankie stared at her. "You just freed yourself." In Link. The door behind them closed. The name Kizzy dimmed to black, and the spiral shifted again. Somewhere below deck, Leg Amazing stirred. Chapter 38. The Captain Who Wouldn't Die. Leg Amazing stood on the glass like gravity bowed to him. He was dressed in a tattered captain's coat, once navy blue with gold trim, now soaked in a darkness that shimmered like oil. His face was only half there, burned away by time, bone visible where a jaw should have been, but his eyes, they glowed red, not from rage, from purpose. "You freed 3, he rasped, "but 7 still belong to me." The water behind him bubbled as Duenna and Santana floated lifeless in their suspended tank, locked in something deeper than sleep. Kizzy took a step forward, but Leg Amazing raised a gloved finger. "Don't. They chose this. Their deaths are currency." The crew fanned out. K-Rob kept his eye on the compass, though it twitched like it had lost its direction. Frankie kept his hand on Kilo, who growled low but didn't bark. Melissa and Icy kept close, unsure if the ground beneath them would remain solid. Mulan whispered, "You were a real captain once." "I still am," Leg Amazing replied, his voice deep and old. "But I was betrayed. My ship sunk not from war, but from faithlessness." Flash. The tank behind him lit up like a memory projector. The sea. During World War I, the original ship, the Mazi's Bones, was a war vessel under Leg Amazing's command, but during its final voyage, his own officers turned on him. They'd made a pact with something beneath the water, a spirit of the deep promising immortality in exchange for souls. When Leg Amazing refused, they locked him in the hull and sacrificed the crew anyway. The ship exploded mid-transmission, but the curse stayed alive. Leg Amazing didn't die. He changed. He became the anchor that kept all those souls bound. 3 of the 10 resisted, he said, voice rising. They tried to break the loop, to save, to love. That made them pure. Kizzy narrowed her eyes. "That's why they help us. That's why I couldn't trap them," he growled. "But the rest are mine." Frankie stepped forward. "What do you want from us?" Leg Amazing smiled, broken teeth reflecting the tank's glow. "To finish what I started. To give you a choice." He pointed to the tank. "One of them leaves, one stays. But either way, someone drowns forever." The chamber dimmed. A ticking sound echoed, like a grandfather clock counting down. 10 seconds. The water in the tank began to rise. Kizzy screamed and slammed her hand against the barrier. "We're not playing your game." "You already are," Leg Amazing said. "You stepped aboard the Mazi. You danced in her belly. You named the ghosts." K-Rob looked at the compass. It spun violently, then cracked. The glass split down the middle. "We can't break this from here." "Then we go through," Melissa said, looking toward the water. "You're not a ghost," K-Rob said. "You'll drown." Frankie suddenly stepped forward. Kilo barked, and the barrier in front of him shattered. Frankie ran to the tank. Leg Amazing didn't stop him. "Choose," the captain said. Frankie stared at Santana, at Duenna. Both were limp. Both flickered between memory and nightmare. He pressed a hand to the glass and whispered, "Take me instead." The water surged. A blast of wind knocked everyone off their feet, but Santana's body lurched, forward choking, coughing, alive. Duenna remained, still floating, but smiling now, eyes closed, peaceful. Leg Amazing stepped back into the water. 4 freed, 6 remain. He began to dissolve, turning into shadow and ash, drifting into the tank. His voice echoed one last time. "But remember, this ship remembers everything." Santana fell to his knees, dripping. "She saved me." "No," Kizzy said. "Frankie saved you." Frankie stood in silence. The star mark on his hand now burned red instead of white. And behind them, on the wall of the chamber, another door appeared. Carved into it were 6 names. The next ghost, the next chapter, the next nightmare. Chapter 39, The Shadow Passenger. The air thickened after Leg Amazing vanished. No howling wind, no screeching metal, just silence that ached. Kilo sat by the tank, ears up, watching Duenna's body slowly dissolve into streaks of blue light, like stardust slipping through water. She didn't fight, she didn't scream, she simply let go. Santana sat beside her, silent, soaked, haunted. She knew she wasn't coming back, he said. She was already gone. The newly appeared door on the far side of the chamber pulsed with dull orange light. 6 names carved into it, stacked unevenly, as if the ship itself had etched them during a fit of madness. Some names had already been scratched through. Nick, Link Jr., Dewena, Melissa's cousin. 4 names, 4 ghosts, freed or faded. 2 left unsaved, and 6 still bound. K-Rob stepped toward the door. His shoulders had changed since the start of this trip, broader, heavier, like the weight he carried inside was no longer shame. It was purpose. Whatever's next, we're not waiting for it to find us. Damn right, Icy said. We hunting ghosts now. Frankie glanced back one last time. We should bury her. Keezy rested a hand on his shoulder. She already is. They opened the door, and it didn't lead to another chamber. It led back to the main cruise floor. But something was wrong. The casino lights were on. Music played. Guests walked around laughing, eating, dancing like nothing was happening, like they'd never left. What is this? Mulan said. Are we dreaming again? Melissa touched a passing woman's shoulder. Solid, warm. This is real. Frankie's eyes narrowed. Number, it's familiar. From behind a slot machine, a man stepped out. Tall, pale, grinning too wide, wearing a ship's uniform but with no rank, no badge, just a blank name tag. His skin flickered, like static. Welcome back, he said. We've missed you. K-Rob clenched his jaw. You're not crew. I'm not anything, the man smiled. That's the fun of it. Call me Echo. Echo waved his hand and the entire floor changed. Guests froze, lights dimmed, and a mirror the size of a movie screen rolled down from the ceiling. Inside the mirror, the crew. All of them, but acting out events they hadn't lived. Keezy begging for help in a burning room. Frankie whispering into Kilo's ear as the dog turned into shadow. K-Rob kneeling in front of a ghost child holding his own name. These are things that could have happened, Echo said. Still might. You're walking through a space between where choices echo and become real. He pointed to the bar. Behind it, someone sat. A shadow version of Santana. Head down, drink untouched. That's not me, Santana said. No, Echo smiled. It's who you could be. The shadow Santana looked up. His face wasn't rotted, but his eyes were completely black. He spoke. You let her die. Santana stepped back. This ain't real. It's as real as your guilt, Shadow Santana replied. He stood, knocking over the drink. The glass shattered, and the casino melted away, again leaving them in darkness with only glowing mirrors all around. Each one showed a version of them, a mistake, a sin, a betrayal. Echo floated above them now. To pass the next gate, you must break your reflection, the one that holds your worst truth. He vanished. They stood in silence. Each mirror began to hum, vibrating with power, reflections twitching. Keezy saw herself walking away from her mother again. K-Rob saw a version of himself standing with the mutinous crew who betrayed Leg Amazing. Frankie saw a version of himself letting go of Kilo's leash and the world catching fire. Santana's mirror didn't reflect him at all. It reflected Dewena. The mirrors began to crack, one by one. And behind them, a figure stirred. Not Echo, not a ghost. Something older, something that remembered every name, every sin, every echo. Chapter 40, The Mirrors Must Break. The mirrors pulsed. One by one, they came alive with sound each, humming at a different pitch like a choir of grief. The dark, endless space the crew now stood in wasn't just blackness. It was a theater, a stage, a purgatory where memory twisted into weaponry. They were no longer surrounded by walls. They were surrounded by selves, versions that shouldn't exist but did. Keezy stepped up to hers first. Her reflection played out the night her mother died. A thunderstorm, a flashing street lamp. Keezy, soaked in rain, running away while her mother screamed her name from the porch. She remembered this night. She told herself it wasn't her fault, that she had no choice. But this Keezy didn't run. She went back. She saved her, and then she died anyway. What kind of game is this? Keezy whispered. Her reflection stared through the mirror, eyes full of sorrow. Then her mouth opened, and a black, gnarled hand reached through the glass. Keezy stumbled back. K-Rob caught her. You have to destroy it, he said. With what? She asked. Frankie spoke calmly. With what you wish you did. Keezy reached into her coat and pulled out her mom's old bracelet, the one she hadn't worn in years. She didn't even remember putting it in her pocket. But the ship remembered. She gripped it tight. and slammed it into the glass. The mirror shattered. Her reflection vanished. The air around her lightened. Her name whispered once and then fell silent. One down. K-Rob approached his. It didn't show blood or fire or ghosts. It showed him in the officer's uniform from Mazi's Bones, the original warship, standing shoulder to shoulder with the men who mutinied, smiling, drinking. He wasn't the traitor, but he could have been. He'd always wondered if he had that in him. "This isn't real," he muttered. His reflection turned, holding a piece of the compass. Broken, it threw it down at his feet and mouthed the words, "You broke everything." K-Rob reached into his chest pocket and pulled out the piece of the real compass, the one that had cracked when Leg Amazing vanished. He raised it high, then drove it into the glass. Crash. His mirror burst into dust. Another echo silenced. Melissa approached hers with a heavy heart. She saw her cousin, the last thing she said before dying. They had fought before the trip, over a man, over a secret. Melissa never apologized. In the mirror, she did, and her cousin lived, but at a cost. Melissa pulled out a photo wrinkled, hidden in her bra since the funeral. She pressed it to the mirror and said, "I forgive you." The glass cracked, then exploded. Frankie's was the hardest. His mirror didn't show guilt. It showed Kilo burning alive. It showed Frankie walking away, a version of him who had never come aboard the ship, never helped anyone. "I would never," Frankie whispered, eyes filling. The reflection stared at him, unblinking. Kilo whimpered. Frankie kneeled down and hugged the dog. "You're not just a pet, you're part of me." He stood up, looked the mirror dead in the eye, and snapped his fingers. Kilo barked once. The mirror shattered into white light. Santana faced his mirror last, but it wasn't his. It was Dewena, alive, smiling, holding his hand. They were back on the deck. Before everything, the version of them that could have been. She looked at him through the mirror and said, "I would have stayed." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the necklace she'd left behind in his room. He kissed it, then gently tapped it to the glass. "And I would have let you go." The mirror cracked and shattered into silence. All 5 mirrors were gone. The space lit up with pale green fire. From the floor, a staircase descended. Wooden, rotten, dripping with seawater, and above it, a voice echoed. Leg Amazing's, but not from his mouth. From the ship itself. "Welcome to Deck Zero. You've broken your reflections. Now face your truth." Chapter 41, The Deck Below All Others. The staircase groaned beneath their feet. Each step down was like wading into memory heavy, thick, slow. The wood wasn't just old, it was dying. Mold bloomed along the railings. Rust bled through the grain. Something deeper than salt water had soaked into the ship's bones here. Kilo whimpered but didn't stop. Frankie followed. One by one, they descended. And as they passed into the dark, the staircase vanished behind them, sealed off like a mouth that had swallowed its final meal. They entered a long hallway, too narrow for comfort. The walls breathed softly, and voices leaked from behind thin slits in the metal. "Don't forget me. This was my room. He lied to us. We never left the water." Kesey paused at one of the slits. Inside was a small cabin, half submerged in seawater. Floating in the room was a dress, her dress, the one she wore on the first night of the cruise. No body, just a memory of her. "This deck ain't physical," K-Rob muttered. "It's where the ship keeps everything you tried to forget." Mulan clenched her fists. "Then let's burn it down." But the ship was listening now, and it didn't take threats lightly. The hallway widened, opening into a circular chamber that pulsed with faint blue light. At the center stood a massive obsidian slab, about 8 feet tall, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. Frankie walked up first. Kilo growled. Carved into the slab were 10 names each, glowing slightly except for 4. Nick, Melissa, Dewena, Link Jr., all dimmed. 6 names still burned. And above them, in larger script, was etched one word, conduit. "This is the source," Kesey whispered, "the thing holding them here. Or the thing deciding who leaves," K-Rob added. Frankie stepped closer. His name wasn't on it. None of theirs were. Only the ghosts. And yet, he felt heat rising from it, like it knew him. Suddenly, the chamber shuddered. The lights in the walls shifted, casting silhouettes of the remaining ghosts across the room. One was a child. One was a man with no eyes. One was a woman with a firebird tattoo, spreading across her chest, and one wore a mask made of mirrors. The voice returned, not leg amazings this time. Softer, female, gentle, but fraying at the edges. We never meant to be part of this. We were passengers, we were people, but the ship needed anchors. From the walls, thin streams of water crept inward, forming shapes, ghosts. 6 of them, still bound, still dangerous, and in the center, floating above the slab, the mirror ghost. No face, only reflection. It turned toward Frankie and nodded. You see more than you should. That dog, it's not just yours. Frankie held Kilo tighter. What are you? The mirror ghost didn't answer. It turned to the group and said, Deck 0 is not a place. It's a moment, and you've reached it. The walls began to collapse outward, folding like paper boats into open sea. Suddenly, they were all standing on a docked version of the Mazi abandoned, still creaking under twilight. The crew that had died was walking the decks in reverse, eating, laughing, dancing backwards. Time was peeling in reverse. Keezy stepped forward. She could see herself in a window. Day 1, just arriving, smiling with K-Rob. It's giving us a chance to do something, she whispered. Or trap us here, K-Rob warned. Frankie turned. The mirror ghost hovered close. One of you must enter the conduit. One of you must remain, or we all go dark. The crew stared at each other. The cost was always blood, always choice. And the ship was growing hungry again. Chapter 42. The passenger must decide. They stood in silence as the illusion of the docked Mazi shimmered around them like a memory trapped in an oil slick. The dead moved in reverse through time, laughing, kissing, dancing, unaware they were specters in someone else's dream. The mirror ghost hovered just inches above the deck, a slow pulse flickering where its face should be. Frankie kept his eyes on it. What happens if no one enters the conduit? The ghost answered without words, just turned its head toward the sea. There, far on the horizon, the water boiled black. Something enormous was rising. Keezy's throat tightened. We don't have time to argue. Someone's got to go in. K-Rob stepped forward, jaw clenched. Let it be me. Nah, Santana said, weak but alive. You still got more to fix. Melissa glared at the mirror. How do we even know it's telling the truth? We don't, Mulan snapped, but we've seen what happens when we do nothing. Kilo barked once, loud, sharp, then walked slowly toward the conduit slab. Frankie watched his dog move like it was following a map only it could see. The slab's glow intensified. Wait, Frankie said. I think it's trying to show us something. Suddenly, the mirror ghost drifted toward the group. It stopped in front of Santana, then Keezy, then finally, Frankie. And only then did it speak again. He was never a passenger. He was always part of the lock. A chill ran through the group. Frankie stared back at the ghost. You mean me? The mirror ghost nodded once. You were born on the water. The night leg amazing vanished the first time. The storm marked you. You were always meant to return. The sea outside cracked like glass. The black wave rose higher. Beneath it, the outline of something with wings, feathers made of fire and bones, a creature that had once whispered promises to Leg Amazing's traitorous crew. The anchor of the curse. If Frankie enters the conduit, K-Rob said, does the curse break? The mirror ghost tilted slightly. If he remembers who he really is, yes. Frankie's hands trembled. Kilo whined beside him. And if I don't, the Mazi sinks again, the ghost said. And so do all of you. Santana placed a hand on Frankie's shoulder. You got this, dog. You more than just here. You the key. Frankie didn't smile, but he nodded. He turned to the conduit. Kilo looked up at him, then walked beside him. Frankie reached out, and the slab opened like a blooming flower of obsidian. Inside was only light. He stepped in. Kilo followed. The slab closed, and the black wave on the horizon began to slow. Inside the conduit, Frankie floated. He saw the Mazi when it was still a warship. He saw the mutiny. He saw Leg Amazing burned alive by fire conjured from the ocean. He saw 10 souls offered to the sea anchors to bind the ship in eternal recursion. But one soul was never claimed. A baby, floating in a box, lifted from the wreckage, alive. Frankie screamed. The light consumed him. He remembered everything. Back on the deck, the mirror ghost blinked out. The slab melted, and in its place, Frankie stood, different. His eyes glowed blue and red. He wasn't alone in there. Keezy whispered. Frankie? He turned, smiled gently. We've got one chapter left. Let's end this. Chapter 43, Born of the Wreck. Frankie didn't just glow, he radiated. His veins pulsed with the ship's memory ghost light flowing beneath his skin in patterns that matched the carvings on the conduit slab. He was still Frankie on the outside, but something inside had awakened. Something buried. Keezy stepped forward cautiously. Talk to me, Frankie. Frankie blinked slow, then looked at Kilo. The dog wagged its tail once and laid down at his feet, calm for the first time since the Mazi started falling apart. I remember everything, he said. Not just the wreck, not just the ghosts. I remember what the ship is. The others closed in, listening as the thunder outside grew louder. The Mazi wasn't just cursed, Frankie continued. It was recruited. That night during the war, a being from beneath the ocean, older than ghosts, older than God shows it as a vessel. 10 souls were the toll, 10 souls to keep it tethered to this plane, a floating prison that sails between life and death. The ship needed a key, a survivor who never died. He looked around at all of them. That was me. K-Rob clenched his fist. Then what do we do with all that truth? Frankie pointed to the final name glowing on the far wall. It wasn't one of the 10. It said, Captain. Leg Amazing's not the captain anymore. I am. Lightning struck the water outside, revealing for the briefest moment the shape rising beneath the sea, not just a wave, but a winged mass of shadow and bone, the ancient entity, the one that started it all. Mulan looked to the others. If this thing's been steering the ship all along, what happens when we cut the wheel? Keezy nodded. We end the voyage. Or we go down with it. Frankie stepped to the helm, an old ghost wheel now glowing faintly beside the conduit. He gripped it, and every light on the ship dimmed. The floor beneath them vibrated, and the air rippled like they were inside a dream being rewritten. I can take the Mazi into the void, Frankie said. Send it back to where it came from, but I need one of you to seal the gate behind me. Silence. Santana stepped forward. I'll do it. Everyone turned. Bro, you barely made it back, Icy said. Exactly, Santana replied. I already died. I ain't scared of it no more. He looked at Keezy, then Melissa. Tell my mom I wasn't a waste. Keezy swallowed hard. You weren't. You saved lives. Santana nodded, then bumped fists with K-Rob. Y'all better actually live now. Frankie turned the wheel. The floor cracked. The chamber began to rise, turning into a spiraling spire of glass and steel. The entire ship lifted from the water, spinning slowly, as if breaking free from gravity's grip. Outside, the winged entity shrieked, a sound like 1,000 anchors scraping the ocean floor. Frankie closed his eyes. Let me go home. Santana walked to the final switch, a small lever made of obsidian. He grabbed it, turned back one last time. I ain't scared of ghosts. Then he pulled it. The floor beneath Frankie collapsed, swallowing him and Kilo in a tunnel of light. The ship screamed, and then silence. 1 second later, the Mazi dropped gently into calm, moonlit waters. Deck lights flickered back on. The ghosts were gone. No more whispers, no more screams. Just the hum of a ship finally at peace. Keezy sobbed into K-Rob's chest. Melissa held Mulan's hand. Icy fell to his knees, laughing through tears. K-Rob stared at the sky and whispered, Thank you, Frankie. But far below, in the ship's deep hull, a single red eye blinked open. Something had survived. Chapter 44, The Unmoored. They thought it was over. The air on deck had shifted lighter, quieter, like the ship had taken its first breath in 100 years. The sky was clean, the water still. For the first time since they boarded the Mazi, the survivors didn't feel hunted. Keezy stood at the rail, eyes on the horizon, whispering Santana's name to the wind. He did it, she said. He really did. K-Rob nodded, but his eyes were still fixed on the reflection in the water. Something felt off. Below deck, the ship creaked unnaturally. Deep in the storage bowels where the light never reached, where even the ghosts had feared to tread, the remains of the conduit pulsed with a flicker. Not light, not life, but memory. A shadow slithered from the cracks. Red-eyed, slow, watching, the entity hadn't vanished. It had simply unlatched from the rules. It no longer needed the anchors, no longer needed the ship. It was free. Frankie wasn't dead. Not quite. He existed now in a dream between space adrift and what the Mazi had once called its soul. He floated beside Kilo, surrounded by blue mist and flickers of timelines, reliving everything all at once. Nick's laughter, Link Jr., his jokes, Melissa's final prayer, Santana's goodbye. He whispered to Kilo, "We did it, right?" Kilo didn't bark. He growled. Something else was in there, watching. Back on the surface, the survivors gathered in the dining hall. It had reset itself to cloths pressed, candles lit, food steaming like it had never been touched by death. The ship was pretending to be normal. That's what unsettled Mulan most. Why is this ship acting like it's a hotel again? Icy poured himself a drink. Maybe we beat it into submission. Melissa didn't sit. She stared at the ceiling. Or maybe it's stalling. Suddenly, all the lights went red. The candles flickered out. Every dish on the table rotted in seconds. A low hum echoed across the ship like something dragging its claws along the hull from the outside. Keezy stood up fast. "That's not possible." K-Rob was already running. "Come on, back to the top deck now." As they emerged onto the deck, the sea had turned black again. Not from storm clouds, but from oil, thick, shimmering, bubbling like tar. Floating above it, halfway between sky and sea, a face, feminine, masked, half human, half anchor. Its eyes open, one glowed red, the other was Frankie's. K-Rob froze. "What the hell are we looking at?" The voice came from everywhere. "You took the lock out of the door. Now the door swings both ways." The entity had merged with Frankie, or worse, had used him as a bridge. Melissa screamed and grabbed a flare gun from a nearby safety kit. She fired it into the sky. Nothing. The flame bent and fell backward into the sea, where it was consumed. Mulan clutched her necklace and muttered a prayer she hadn't said in years. Keezy looked up and whispered, "Santana, if you're still out there, we need you." The creature laughed. 10 souls unlocked me, but the key was born aboard. And now I write the story. It opened its arms, and from the Black Sea, hands began to rise. Hundreds. Crawling fingers, long wet arms, old crew members, dead guests, even Nick's face half melted, grinning with empty eyes. "It's not over," Keezy said. "Not until we end the ship." K-Rob stepped forward. "Then we go into the heart. We find what's left of Frankie, and we bring him back." Chapter 45, Dead Men Rise with the Tide. The water around the Mazi boiled. The black, oil-slick sea sloshed against the hull with thick slaps, rising higher than the tides had any right to. The ghostly hands clawing from below were no longer illusions or nightmares, they were real. Corpses that should have remained part of the past now surged forward like they'd been called or commanded. Keezy stared down at the deck. Water pooled at her boots. They're boarding. The first to crawl over the railing was Link Jr., or what was left of him, his head tilted too far to one side, mouth half open, skin bubbled and peeled. But his voice? It was his. "Keezy," he rasped, "tell my pops I ain't mad." Keezy couldn't move. K-Rob pulled her back as Link Jr.'s corpse lunged forward. Icy swung a crowbar and knocked it overboard. "That wasn't him," Icy said. "That ain't him. It's the ship." More bodies poured in. Nick, the winner, Melissa's twisted reflection, even the security guards from the first night, all dead, all puppets. They weren't hunting. They were trying to take the Mazi back. Frankie still floated in the dream space, screaming through memories that weren't his, watching himself as a child being pulled from the wreckage, watching Leg Amazing burn, watching the creature whisper into a young officer's ear. He was both himself and the door. He didn't know how to close it, not until he saw her, the winner, not the puppet, the real ghost. She floated beside him, surrounded by faint gold light. "They're using me," she said, "using all of us. But I broke free." "How?" Frankie asked. The winner reached out, "Because love don't leave without a mark." She placed her hand on his chest, and the ghost light inside him flared brighter than ever. Back on deck, Keezy saw it first. The sky cracked just a slice and a beam of blue light came from nowhere. It hit the deck with a force that blasted every puppet into dust. At the center of the beam, Frankie, alive, but not just Frankie. He floated above the deck, cloak of energy around him, Kilo howling at his side. "Back off my ship," he said. He slammed his hands together. The water rolled backward, literally retreated. The Black Sea hissed like it was being burned. The corpses screamed and dissolved mid-step. K-Rob ran to him. "You good?" Frankie landed softly, eyes tired, face human again, barely. Keezy looked at the sky, which still held the massive, masked face of the entity. That thing's still watching. Frankie nodded. Not for long. He turned to the center of the ship, toward the control room deep beneath the casino floor, a place nobody had ever accessed. We ended at the helm. As they moved below deck, the ship warped and flickered like it didn't want them there. Halls stretched, walls twisted, doors blinked in and out of existence. But Frankie pushed forward. The others followed. In the command room, dust-coated old weapons, maps, and documents from World War I. At the center was a wheel made of bone and copper. Frankie walked to it. This is where it started. He placed his hands on it, and the room trembled. The entity's voice screamed one last time, "You were never supposed to remember." Frankie didn't flinch. Too late. He turned the wheel, once, twice, and with the third turn, the entire ship lit up. A tower of energy shot into the sky. The Black Sea dried into ash. The entity fractured like glass. And the Mazi stopped moving for the first time in a century. They had done it, but the ship had one final message to send. One last secret tucked in the boiler room. Keezy turned to Frankie. "What's below the helm?" He looked down, eyes wide. The ones who built the ship. Chapter 46. The founders were never human. The floor beneath the helm opened like a breathing womb. Metal plates folded inward, revealing a spiral staircase bathed in flickering green light. Steam hissed upward in slow bursts, like the ship itself was sighing reluctant, but resigned. Frankie stood at the edge, his voice low. "This ain't part of the blueprints." Keezy gripped his arm, "But it's part of the truth." K-Rob checked the last shell in his flare pistol and nodded. "We've come this far." One by one, they descended into the ship's spine. It was colder than any place on board. The temperature dropped with each step. Their breath fogged in the air, and condensation formed on their skin. The walls weren't just metal, they were organic, veined, pulsing, like the inside of something that had never been meant to float on water. At the bottom, they reached a long corridor lined with glass sarcophagi. Inside each one lay a humanoid figure, not human, not anymore. Pale skin stretched tight across angular bones, mouths full of sharpened teeth, eyes sealed shut with black thread. Etched on each tank was a number and a name in a language none of them could read. Mulan whispered, "These look like designers." Melissa trembled beside her. "They look like mistakes." Frankie stepped closer to the first tank. Suddenly, the creature's eyes snapped open. They glowed with deep emerald light, piercing and ancient. Frankie didn't move. "You were the builders," he said quietly. "You made the Mazi what it is." The creature's lips moved no sound, but Frankie heard it. In his bones. "We are the ones beneath. We were cast out from the deep to teach man fear." One of the other tanks began to crack. Steam leaked from the seals. K-Rob stepped in front of Keezy. "What happens if they wake up?" Frankie turned, his face hard. "We don't let them." The voice in his head returned. "You are born of the lock, but you do not understand its depth." The ship was not cursed. It was offered. Suddenly, images filled their minds, visions of ancient rituals held beneath oceans, offerings made to beings who ruled long before humanity. The Mazi, a warship at the time, had been gifted to the ones beneath in exchange for control of death. But the gift was incomplete, 10 souls short, and so the ship hunted. Melissa stepped back, horrified. This was never about ghosts. It was a feeding system. Frankie nodded, "And we've been choking it." Another tank cracked. The creature inside began to move. Frankie raised his hand. Blue light surged from his palm conduit energy. The tank stopped pulsing. He closed his eyes. "I don't know if I can hold them. Not forever." Keezy stepped forward. "Then we don't stay. We shut it all down." At the far end of the corridor was a control panel, old, rusted, and half submerged in oily water. Symbols glowed on its face, a spiral, a flame, and a lock. Frankie placed his hand on it. The voice returned, pained. "If you seal us, you seal yourself." He nodded. "I know." K-Rob stepped beside him. "Then let's all leave something behind." One by one, they pressed their hands to the console, and the deck above them rumbled. Steam burst from every corner. The sarcophagi hissed, and the ones beneath began to scream. But it was too late. The Mazi shuddered, and for the first time since World War I, it began to sink, not in water, in time. As the walls collapsed inward, Frankie turned to the crew. "Run." I'll hold the door. Kilo growled, standing beside him. Keezy shook her head. Not again. Frankie smiled. This is different. This time it's not about escape. It's about ending the hunger. They ran, and behind them, Frankie stood with arms raised, eyes glowing. As the Mazi's deepest secrets were swallowed whole, Chapter 47, Surface Doesn't Mean Safety. When the survivors burst onto the top deck, the sky was blood orange. Not sunset, not dawn, something in between. Keezy fell to her knees, gasping. K-Rob knelt beside her, one hand on her back, the other gripping his flare gun like it could still change something. Melissa leaned against a railing, staring at the sea. It wasn't black anymore. It wasn't even water. It looked like molten glass, still, but always shifting beneath the surface. We made it, she whispered. Mulan glanced upward. Then why don't I feel safe? Behind them, the ship groaned like it was grieving. The Mazi wasn't sinking. Not anymore. It was peeling away. The metal flaked upward in sheets, dissolving into particles that shimmered, froze midair, and scattered. Deck by deck, room by room, the ship was unraveling into the wind. But one thing remained untouched. The mirror gate, a slab of onyx floating mid-deck, humming with low static. Frankie hadn't emerged. Not yet. And no one was saying it, but everyone was thinking the same thing. What if this time he doesn't? Icy dropped onto a lounge chair, breathing hard. So what now? Keezy stood up slowly. We wait. Hours passed. The sun didn't move. The sea didn't rise or fall. And the mirror gate didn't flicker. Until it did. One small blink. Then a pulse. Then a crack. From its surface, a ripple shot outward. K-Rob stood up. Something's coming through. Melissa stepped back. Please let it be him. The gate burst like water under pressure, and Frankie stepped out, soaked, trembling, but whole. Kilo leapt through behind him and howled once, sharp and triumphant. The group rushed forward, surrounding Frankie in a blur of hugs, tears, and laughter. Keezy gripped his shoulders. You did it. Frankie didn't answer. Not at first. He just looked at the sea. No, he said quietly. We slowed it down. What do you mean? Mulan asked. Frankie wiped blood from his mouth. The ones beneath can't reach us anymore. But they're still, somewhere, waiting. Suddenly, every phone on the deck dead since day one buzzed to life. Screens turned on. Static, then text. Do not return to the sea. The lock is damaged. The hunger remembers. Keezy whispered. Who sent that? Frankie shook his head. Someone else who survived. The mirror gate crumbled. The Mazi's final remains scattered like ashes. And in the silence that followed, the sky finally shifted. Sunlight returned. Real this time, Mulan laughed through tears. Icy screamed into the wind. Melissa fell to her knees and prayed for the first time in years. K-Rob looked at Keezy. We go home. She nodded. If home still exists. Frankie stared at the glassy ocean. Somewhere, deep beneath it, something ancient was stirring. Chapter 48, Return to the Waking World. The rescue boat came at dawn. A simple white vessel with faded red letters, Mercy Coastal. It looked small, almost insultingly so, after everything they'd survived. But to the ones who'd made it off the Mazi, it looked like freedom. Keezy was the first to step aboard. She turned once, staring back at the glass sea where the ship had disappeared. No trace of the deck, no floating debris, not even a ripple, just silence and memory. The crew on board Mercy didn't ask questions. They didn't take statements. They just wrapped the survivors in thermal blankets and handed out warm drinks. How long were you at sea? One medic asked. Frankie looked up, long enough to forget what quiet feels like. Kilo sat at his side, strangely calm like whatever had possessed the dog during the voyage had finally gone dormant. One of the medics reached to pet him. Kilo growled once. Just once. Low and slow. The medic pulled his hand back. Good boy, Frankie muttered. K-Rob and Keezy sat on the upper deck, the rising sun warming their skin. We made it out, Keezy said. K-Rob took her hand. Number, we earned our way out. Their fingers laced, no more space between them. Whatever pain their marriage once held, it had been burned away in the fire of survival. Keezy smiled faintly. So what now? Therapy, K-Rob replied without hesitation, and no more boats. Mulan and Melissa sat beside Icy at the ship's stern. They didn't speak much. There weren't words for what they'd seen. But Mulan pulled out a piece of paper soaked, wrinkled but still intact. It was a flyer. Mazi Luxury Line, one night only, rebirth cruise. Melissa lit it with a match and let it burn over the side. Never again, she whispered. Frankie stood at the edge of the ship, looking toward the horizon. He felt it. Even now, the ones who'd built the ship, they weren't truly gone. They were waiting. And the hunger? It never dies. It only forgets for a little while. Back inside the cabin, one of the medics turned on a radio. Static, then a clear voice. Breaking news. The disappearance of the luxury ship Mazi has finally come to an end. Survivors have been recovered after what authorities are calling a rare electrical storm and engine failure. The full story remains unclear. Kesey laughed bitterly. Engine failure? Try cursed hull and interdimensional death maze. The boat docked at a quiet marina. No reporters, no police. Only one man waited, dressed in gray, eyes too sharp for a civilian. He nodded once at Frankie as he passed. Good work, we'll be in touch. Frankie stared back. You don't even know what we did. The man smiled faintly. You closed the door, that's all that matters. He walked away, vanished into a black SUV. The group stood on land again, real, solid land. And for the first time in what felt like centuries, they breathed without fear. But behind them, just offshore, the sea shimmered. Once, twice, then stillness. Frankie whispered to the wind, if you ever come back, we'll be ready. Chapter 49, Ashes of the Deep. Weeks passed. They scattered across the map, back to the lives they thought they wanted to reclaim. Kesey and K-Rob settled in a quiet part of Florida away from the coast, away from anything that reminded them of steel halls and endless decks. Their marriage, still scarred, but healing. Kesey picked up journaling. K-Rob started therapy. They walked together every morning. They talked again. Still, some nights, she heard waves in her sleep. Mulan went back to Philly. The salon was still hers, but she didn't reopen it right away. She painted the walls a darker color, hung new curtains, bought a dog. Melissa stayed with her at first, both for the comfort and the silence. Neither of them could say the word Mazi without shivering. Icy tried to drink it all away. He moved to Atlanta, blew a few checks on fast nights, faster girls, but nothing erased what he'd seen. Nothing ever really would. He kept a photo of the group taken right before the cruising on his fridge. He crossed out every face that didn't make it back. Frankie changed addresses 3 times in a month. He told no one where he lived. The last anyone saw of him, he was in Montana off-grid. Kilo always by his side. He'd grown quieter, sharper. He still felt them faint whispers in his dreams. Not nightmares, warnings. Because beneath the earth, where salt water soaked through ancient stone, a voice still whispered, 10 wasn't enough. It never was. You tasted the hunger, now you carry it. The world above moved on. New ships launched, new passengers climbed aboard. New luxury lines boasted unforgettable experiences. And somewhere, someone smiled. A new brochure printed, a new name chosen. Not Mazi, not yet, but something similar. Kesey visited a bookstore one evening. As she walked through the aisles, something caught her eye. A slim black book with a cracked silver title. The Ones Beneath, a naval folktale. No author, no barcode, just there. She opened the cover. Inside was a single sentence. You survived because the sea allowed it. She dropped it, left the store, never looked back. On a rainy evening, K-Rob was driving home when the radio flickered and glitched. A voice crackled through. This is Mercy Coastal. We've spotted a structure out at coordinates 66.4 by 9.2. No record of it, no crew visible. Looks like a... Silence, then static, then screaming. The hunger wasn't gone. It had only shifted. Frankie lit a fire in the woods, sat beside Kilo, and fed a final page to the flames. Project Perseid was never about ghosts. It was about memory, and what lives in the cracks between belief and silence. Kilo barked at the sky. The stars above shimmered just for a second like waves. Chapter 50, The Hunger Never Sleeps. Finale, end of. A red sky blanketed the Pacific. Somewhere, far off any map, deep beneath where sonar dares scan, something old pulsed with new rhythm. The water didn't ripple. It throbbed like a heart finally remembering its beat. The Mazi was gone, but what it fed, Wasn't. End of. Frankie stood at the edge of a cliff in Montana. Kilo was quiet, unusually so. In his hands, Frankie held a notebook, worn, soaked, pages missing, words written in languages that didn't have alphabets. He turned to the last one. The lock was never meant to hold forever, only to stall. He closed it, set it on the rocks, lit a match, and watched it burn. End of. Kesey had nightmares again. This time, the ship didn't haunt her. The people did. She'd see Nick waving from the hallway, DeWinna brushing her hair in a shattered mirror, Santana reaching for her from a poker table with no floor beneath it. But the scariest part? Every night, they moved closer. Every night, she remembered less. End of. K-Rob had changed. He'd taken up carving. Wood, stone, bone. Didn't matter. He said it calmed his mind. But the shapes he made weren't calming. Spirals, masks, symbols from the ship's helm. He didn't realize it. Kesey didn't tell him. End of. Melissa moved out of Mulan's place. She said she needed space. One night, Mulan visited and found her basement full of half-done sketches. One of them, the control room, exactly as it looked the night they left. Melissa didn't remember drawing it, didn't even remember ever seeing it. End of. Frankie got the first envelope 2 days later. No return address. Inside, a Polaroid, a luxury cruise ship floating on black water, the name stenciled across the hull, the Astria. He dropped it. The photograph sizzled on the ground like it was burning from the inside out. End of. They met again one last time. A diner in a forgotten town off a forgotten highway. Kesey, K-Rob, Mulan, Melissa, Icy, and Frankie. No words at first. Just coffee, pie, silence, until Kesey said it. "We're not done, are we?" Frankie stirred his mug. "They're building another one. Or maybe they already did." End of. A beat passed. Then K-Rob. "So what do we do?" Frankie smiled. "Not wide. Just enough. We go back to the water. Not to fight. To warn." End of. Outside, the sky darkened. No clouds. No storm. Just a slow fade to deep, unnatural crimson. A waitress passed their table, humming softly. On her wrist, a small tattoo. A spiral. The group didn't notice. Not yet. But soon. End of. Later that night, the ocean cracked open again. No one saw it. Except a satellite with corrupted data. Except a fisherman who forgot how to speak. Except a child who woke up screaming 3 states away, salt water on her sheets. End of. The Mazi was a warning. Not the beginning. Not the end. Just proof that the hunger never sleeps. That some ships aren't meant to dock. The end. Thank you for riding along the ghost deck. Let me know if you want to expand the universe or sail again. Some voyages end at the shore. Others drift into legend. But the Mazi, it became a warning. Now that you've heard the story, you'll know the signs. A cruise with no return policy. A captain with no reflection. A mirror that shows you drowning when you're still breathing. You survived this time, but if the hunger ever calls again, just remember some ships were never meant to be found. Music fades down. One final ocean wave crashes. From whispers between worlds, uploading daily.